Hey, this is James, the founder of Sweetfish Media. If you've listened to B2B Growth for a while, you probably have an idea of what we're passionate about. Loving people really well, a constant pursuit of learning, and inspiring people to own their careers. With all the craziness happening with this virus, we are incredibly fortunate to be in the business of podcasting. So many B2B brands are looking for alternatives to their in-person events that are being canceled, and our business is growing as a result. Please don't mishear me on this because I'm not saying this to brag. It is heartbreaking, the economic impact this is having on so many businesses. But being in the business of podcasting, the demand for what we do has increased. And because of that, we're looking to hire really talented people to help us serve that demand. So if you like what we're all about at Sweetfish and you're looking for a great career opportunity, hit us up. There's a link in the show notes where you can apply today. I'm really looking forward to meeting you.
Welcome back to B2B Growth. I'm Logan Lyles with Sweetfish Media. Today is another episode in our Behind the Curtain series. We've been having more contributors, more folks here on the Sweetfish team joining these. Today, it's me and our founder and CEO, my good buddy, James Carberry. James, how's it going today, man?
I'm doing well, man. I'm excited to talk about this topic. This is something that actually I was walking around the neighborhood last night and was listening to the At the Table podcast with Patrick Lencioni, and they started talking about this idea. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is brilliant. So I instantly put a couple of these time blocks on my calendar because we're going to start doing this with Sweetfish. I'm going to start doing this with Sweetfish starting next week. So I don't know when this is going to go live. It may have already happened by the time people are listening to this, but I'm really excited about this open office concept.
Yeah, man. So we're going to be talking about how you can recreate kind of the feeling and some of the advantages of an in-person open office, even while you're working remotely, and leverage Zoom or whatever sort of conference call tool that you're using on a day-to-day basis. So tell us a little bit about what you heard, kind of what it sparked for you when you heard this on Patrick's podcast, man.
Yeah. So Patrick was talking about the need for us to use Zoom as not restricting the use of Zoom just for meetings. So he said if it was him or his co-host that said, if you're just using Zoom and at the top of every one of your Zoom calls, if the heading is a specific agenda item or a measurable result that you're trying to achieve, then you're probably not getting the most out of Zoom. And then they started talking about this concept of opening up the floor and just saying, hey, I'm going to be working this afternoon on a couple projects. Here's my Zoom link if anybody wants to hop on and work with me. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is so brilliant. It's fantastic. I think for, the entire world is working remote right now. But for us, obviously, we work remote all the time. And I love this idea because there's all of this negative talk around the open office. And I totally get it. Like it makes perfect sense why in an open office format, productivity plummets because it's just a constant barrage of distractions. But in a virtual environment, we literally have no distractions to the point where we can feel isolated, right? So I'm on calls all day. I'm talking to people all day long. So I don't necessarily feel it as much, but for our writers, for our producers, for other people on our team, they're heads down, doing heads down focused work for pretty much the entire week. And now that we're all quarantined and we can't get out at all, opening something like this up and starting to do this to where, next Thursday, I'm just going to put my Zoom link out. I'm going to tell the team on Monday, like, hey, Thursday from 1 to 5 p.m. Eastern, I'm going to be working. And I've got a couple projects that aren't necessarily phone calls. I think I've got one phone call in there. So obviously, I'll mute myself on Zoom and go and take my phone call during that time. But I'm putting it as an open, so it's in my Google Calendar. The calendar invite is just a 4-hour time block, but I've left it open. So if people are using my Calendly link, they can still block time during that block. Other people, our operations assistant can still put time on there if things need to get put on there. But it's essentially just kind of creating this feeling of, hey, I'm going to go to the conference room and work on some stuff if anybody wants to join me in there. And I'm really excited about that. This is something we can implement long after this virus is done, because we don't have any intention of having a physical office ever. But I think controlling the open office is a powerful idea, because like you had mentioned, something that Ethan Beute from BombBomb talks about a lot is the cross-pollination of ideas. So when you're in the same room and you're having, this is something Lencioni talked about in the podcast too, there's a difference between having like happy hour conversation where you're intentionally not talking about work, but where you're with colleagues. But he said, I think we should have more conversation around the business that's not necessarily focused on a specific topic, but we're talking about work with our coworkers. And so we're talking about that client that we're having a hard time with, or we're talking about a win that we got. And I think by opening up an environment like with an open Zoom room where everybody is just working, I could imagine a setting where maybe our creative director, our customer director of customer experience, myself, and maybe two of our writers are all in this room. And we've got a writer that unmutes herself and she's like, hey, I'm writing for this client. What are your thoughts on this, this, and this? Well, that could open up a whole slew of like, oh, I never even realized that was something that you had to think about in the writing process of our articles. We need to create a process that alleviates you having to make that decision or something else, whatever the issue is. But by not being around each other, we're not privy to seeing those kind of things because we're so isolated in the work that we do outside of meetings that have a very specific purpose. So what are your thoughts on this? This is a new idea, obviously. I just heard about it last night.
Yeah, you just told me about it like 10 minutes before we hit record. And I was like, man, this is really cool. And something that kind of clicked for me as you were just talking there, James, you and I have a weekly one-on-one, right? And I think we've gotten better at structuring those. Hey, let's add stuff to the list. I've got a list of things that I need to talk to you that I didn't necessarily need to ping you about and distract you in the middle of a Tuesday or whatever, but timely. And so we've created some more structure and rhythm on our team, on the leadership team, and throughout the team for one-on-ones. But at the same time, as you were talking about like the conversations that can come up naturally, I've mentioned my dog that co-offices with me a lot, Mac, here on the show. As I'm walking him, usually at night after the kids have gone to bed, you and I have had some of our most productive conversations where I just called you and it was like, hey, let's just talk about the day a little bit. And we end up talking for 45 minutes or an hour about how we could shift our service or different things that we need to address or those sorts of things. And usually those calls don't start out with a specific agenda of, James, let's go through this checklist. I'm going to call you at 7:30 when I'm walking the dog and we're going to go boom, boom, boom through this bullet pointed list. But it has meandered along with my walk with the dog, meandering along the sidewalk, has meandered into some really great stuff. The other thing that I think for folks, you do a really good job of communicating, where we're going, things that are that need to be, the whole team needs to know about right now. But I imagine there are a lot of teams right now where leadership and the entire organization is not used to working remotely. And so doing something like this, as well as some other things to proactively communicate with the entire organization, can help people feel more connected to what's going on, more informed on what's going on with leadership, and therefore feel more safe and secure. And the more secure you can make your team feel right now, probably the better. Do you want to speak to that, kind of from CEO perspective right now?
Yeah. So being available is something that I think I am learning in the last couple months even. There's a difference between saying that you're available. So that's a passive approach for me as a CEO to say, oh, I've got an open door. You can come to me anytime. But I was talking with Ryan from our team about this maybe about a month ago, and he was like, James, it's really easy for you to say that. It's easy for you to tell the entire team, and we don't have a big team. I mean, we've got 20 people, so it's not huge. But it's real easy for you to tell these 20 people, hey, you can reach out to me anytime. You can call me, you can Slack me, you can text me, you can whatever. But what you've got to understand is the mental work that it takes for someone to, the equivalent of get up out of their desk, walk down the hallway, walk into your office, because they're probably not coming to talk to you about something that they think you're doing well. I mean, they've probably got an issue, either with you or with a coworker or with, something they fundamentally disagree on with, our pricing or a product that we're bringing to market or whatever. So it's not a comfortable situation for them. and there's a lot of friction for them. So it's easy for me as a CEO to think, oh, well, I'm checking the box. I'm open. I'm available. I tell our people all the time, they can come and talk to me. But where doing something like this actually says, hey, I'm going to be in this Zoom room, and if anybody wants to work with me, come on in. Like, that's me taking a step toward them so that they can then take a step toward me, as opposed to what I've been doing, which is, hey, I'm available. And we do a weekly video where our entire leadership team, most weeks, our entire leadership team puts up a video on Slack and just updates the team on their department. So I've been doing a lot of updates throughout this pandemic about how the business is doing, getting very granular and specific. These are the customers we lost this week. These are the customers we gained this week. We're still on an upward trajectory. We're very fortunate being in the business that we're in, that the business is still growing. But keeping the team updated and letting them know, hey, we lost 3 customers last week. We picked up 4 new ones and a big renewal. So we're still on an upward trajectory, letting everybody know that as of right now, we are not having to look at any sort of layoffs or anything like that, just keeping them at ease. So I can push that kind of communication to them and try to be as open as I can. But by doing this kind of open office thing, it's just that one additional level where I'm now meeting them halfway. Another thing I'm trying to do more of is just proactively reaching out to individuals on our team. Like I said, we have 20 people, not 200. So right now I can make notes to myself to say, hey, I just need to be checking in with people via text message. Hey, how you doing? Like, how is it, being cooped up? I know you've got 2 kids. How are your kids doing with all this? And so I'm taking emotion toward them, as opposed to what I think a lot of CEOs, and this was me a month ago, you can check the box of thinking you're being a good leader just by communicating to the team that you're available. When you're not actually taking action toward them, it's a pretty passive move to say, hey, I'm available. And it's not empathetic to how difficult it is for the person on the other end of that to go have a conversation with the CEO. Because to me. I'm just a dude. I'm just a guy that decided to start a business half a decade ago, and fortunately have brought a lot of really smart people along the way with me, and it's grown. But to other people, to people that have, just joined the business in the last 6 months, a year, like, it's intimidating because we are fully remote. They don't interact with me a lot. They don't know that if I ever see them in person, my first instinct is going to be to hug them.
I'm glad you went there, because that's exactly what I was going to say. They haven't gotten a James Carberry hug yet.
Yeah, so that's just a part of my personality. Like, I'm very open. I'm very inviting. I mean, we have a guest room in our house, and before this virus, like, we basically had somebody in that guest room every weekend since we've had the house for the last year and a half. But that's me assuming that they know things about me that they just can't know because of the nature of how we work. So by doing things like texting them, by doing things like this open office idea, putting up a Zoom link and saying, hey, I'm going to be working from this, from this link on some different projects from 1 to 5 on Thursday. Anybody's welcome to join me. Would love to jam. And then the conversations that are going to come out of that, I'm going to learn things about how our people are working, like what our people are working on, what different projects are doing. It's going to give me insight as a CEO that I otherwise would not get apart from doing something like this. So that's what I'm really excited about.
Dude, you said it so well. And I love the advice that you're given for other CEOs, founders, and just anyone who's leading a team. Like you said, you can think that, hey, just tactically, logistically, I'm available. They have me on Slack. They have my phone number. They have this. But it's not just about the logistics. It's about the emotions and the motion. I like the way you said it, taking emotion toward them so that they don't have to go as far to get to you. Yeah. So, kind of the way I summarize it, this idea of tactically using a Zoom or Uber conference or whatever conferencing call system you use, creating a block on your calendar, having a Zoom link, sharing that with your team and saying, hey, I'm going to be working here, kind of like you said, like, hey, I'm taking my laptop into the conference room. Anybody that wants to work in there so we can hang out together and maybe talk about what we're working on. There's really kind of 3 key benefits as we've been talking about it. especially right now, you reduce isolation. But I love the way that it does it in general for fully remote teams like ourselves, because I have noticed as we've gotten together more without a work agenda, you've got, happy hours. We did a baby shower remotely here recently. That's kind of on one end of the spectrum. And then you have your typical, hey, let's show up for a 30-minute call. We have an agenda, something in between there to reduce the isolation and have that feeling of community. So that's one. Two, as you said, it can be a tool for leadership to get more connected and therefore get more feedback and help the team feel more secure. And then the great conversation, as we quoted Ethan, I'm sure he's okay with us quoting his offline comment there, the cross-pollination of ideas. He was sharing that with us, I think, when they were talking about kind of their semi-remote, but mostly in-office culture at BombBomb, obviously pre-pandemic. So reducing isolation, getting leadership more connected and people more connected to leadership, and then the great conversations that can improve the business. Those are my three. Do you have anything else to add to that before we wrap, man?
Around the connectedness piece, I think what that connectedness does is it builds trust. And I'm a big proponent, because of all that I've learned from Patrick Lencioni and all of his books, is that if you can have trust amongst your team, you're going to grow. Like, trust is the foundation for everything. And so I think by you taking motion as a leader toward your people, proactively texting them, doing, an open office Zoom call like this, 1 or 2 times a week, I think that's going to be what leads to there being trust. And when people trust you, they can feel like they can come to you with hard things that you as a leader can take that and make the decision that you need to make. But the fact that you have more data points now, so the more people that trust you on your team, the more available data you're going to have for how you're moving the business forward. So that was one piece there. The other thing that I wanted to note here was, I want to acknowledge that the open office thing can be a distraction. So what we're not prescribing is, hey, you should recreate an open office all the time and just have a constant Zoom room that everyone can access 40 hours a week, all throughout the week. And that way it just is all kumbaya and that you guys are all in the same room. This is going to be these 4 hours or 5 hours or 10 hours or whatever you decide to do. Expect less quote unquote productivity. Like, I know that the projects, I've got to carefully select the projects that I'm working on during that block of time, because I've just got to expect that I'm not going to be as productive with that time in the way that I typically think about productivity. But having these kind of side conversations like what you and I have whenever you're walking your dog around the neighborhood at night, those are incredibly productive. We've made significant changes to the business. We've changed our pricing because of those calls. We've gone after, we've developed new products because of those calls. We've done a lot of things because of those calls. They've been extremely effective and productive, but it's been productive in a different type of productive, one that's not expected. It's not necessarily planned. And so go into that knowing, hey, we're not jumping in head first and doing this all of the time. But we're going to do it. We're going to start doing it once a week. We might open up a couple blocks, throughout the week. We might start doing it with teams. So we say, hey, Friday afternoons, all of our producers work together. We might integrate it into onboarding. So we might say, hey, we just hired a new writer. We might say, hey, for your first month, we want you to be working alongside another writer on our team. So you're going to be working with Emily, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and you're going to work with Tim on Tuesday and Thursday. And then the next week, you're going to flip it. So your entire 8-hour day, you and another writer are going to be on the same Zoom call. You're not going to be talking the entire time. Obviously, you're writing. But any questions you have, you're just one mute button away from saying, hey, Emily, sorry, I don't want to bug you, but I've got a quick question here. How do you guys typically do this? Now, again, you've got to account for the fact that in that onboarding scenario, Emily is going to be less productive. So we cannot expect Emily to produce the same amount of work that she produced apart from, working next to our new writer or producer, or whatever the role is. So you have to account for that. And I want to make sure that I say that, because my instinct is to be like, oh yeah, everybody can work together and we expect the same level of productivity. That's not the case. But there are lots of different ways you can do this. Doing it amongst teams, doing it where leadership team invites everybody else on the team to work together. Like, you can slice and dice it in a lot of ways. But I think just thinking about Zoom just as a meeting tool and not a tool like this, where you can have this type of collaboration and this kind of cross-pollination of your team, I think is a miss. I think we've got to be looking at Zoom bigger and more of a human interaction platform and less of a meeting platform.
Dude, I love the way that you said that. There are a couple of things that you said. Make sure that you limit the time. We're not saying flip it on for all 40 hours. Think about productivity differently. And then kind of what you were alluding to there, if you are setting up one of these and inviting people to come work with you, maybe you've got some heads down work that you're not on calls, but not necessarily super deep work where you've got to be really concentrated and you're going to get frustrated by kind of zooming in and out, right? Like,
Yep.
If I'm doing work, at my kitchen island and I, tell my family and tell the kids like, hey, I'm going to do a little work. It might be some light email or something like that, but I'm not like trying to focus on like solving a real deep problem, because that's just not going to work. And Same thing goes for this application, man. Well, this is really cool. I am excited to start implementing this here with our team. And I hope folks get some value out of this. I think it's a different idea. I think it's obviously very timely with more folks who are not used to working remote right now. James, if anybody listening to this, if they're new to the show, they're not connected with you, what's the best way for them to stay connected with you or reach out talking about availability and all that sort of stuff, man?
Yeah, so super active on LinkedIn, just James Carberry on LinkedIn. I'm on Instagram too. Don't do as much there. We're doing a lot more as a company on Instagram. So check us out, Sweetfish Media there. And then I don't know that we've talked about it yet. We probably need to do an entire episode about it, but we just revamped our entire website. So we're out of the Stone Ages now. We had the same website for going on half a decade, and we finally overhauled it. So I'm really excited about that. So if you have not been to sweetfishmedia.com in a while, go check it out there. You'll see the direction that the business is going and really becoming a media company as opposed to just a service provider. So really excited about that, but would love to connect with anybody and everybody. And if you haven't already read the book, make sure to check out the book, Content-Based Networking, on Audible or Amazon.
I love it, man. For anybody listening to this, I'm not yet connected with, just look me up on LinkedIn, just like James. It's where I'm most active. My last name is Lyles. Pretty easy to find if you just search LinkedIn for Logan Lyles. As always, thank you so much for listening, everybody. James, this has been a great conversation. Thanks for bringing this up. I'm glad we shared it with everybody today, and excited to dive in with our team with this new application of Zoom, man.
Yeah. And a lot of this, this is literally came straight from Patrick Lencioni and At the Table. So if you're not already listening to the At the Table podcast, make sure to subscribe to that. It's Patrick, and he brings in different coworkers, mostly Cody from his team, but just phenomenal conversations around work. We have very, very similar whys and like our both At the Table, the Table Group, Patrick's company and our company has very similar missions. So if you like this content, you're going to love At the Table.
Absolutely, man. We'll make sure to link to Patrick Lencioni's podcast in the show notes for folks. So definitely go check that out. And as always, everybody, thank you so much for listening.
I hate it when podcasts incessantly ask their listeners for reviews, but I get why they do it, because reviews are enormously helpful when you're trying to grow a podcast audience. So here's what we decided to do. If you leave a review for B2B Growth in Apple Podcasts and email me a screenshot of the review to james@sweetfishmedia.com, I'll send you a signed copy of my new book, Content-Based Networking, How to Instantly Connect with Anyone You Want to Know. We get a review, you get a free book. We both win.